Hey friends, Wise Squirrels needs your support. We're looking for sponsors for the podcast, for the website, for the newsletter. We'll give you some shout outs on social and all the good places. Reach out to us today. hello@wisesquirrels.com. And in the subject, just write sponsorship and we'll follow up with you directly. Thanks. Wise Squirrels is brought to you by The Root Down, an ADHD-inspired presentation and process to know, respect, and connect yourself. Available now for conferences and savvy companies. The Root Down will bring your team together, teach them about neurodiversity, and a lot more. Check out The Root Down, read the reviews over at wisesquirrels.com today. Welcome to Wise Squirrels, the podcast for late diagnosed adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Dave Delaney. I want to kick off by thanking everybody for leaving your reviews for the podcast. I can't tell you how much I love them. Well, I guess I just did, didn't I? But really, reading your reviews means the world to me. Your kind words help others discover the show, but they also really just mean a lot to me. So no matter where you listen to the podcast, if you wouldn't mind, please leave a rating and review. And honestly, I read every one of them. I just noticed a new one. And yeah, unfortunately, I can't usually tell your names because, they have kind of weird random names. So I don't know what your names are specifically, but I do want to make sure to give you a shout out that if you have left a review, I have read it and thank you for that. And it is the week of giving thanks. Of course, it is Thanksgiving in the US. So I do want to say thank you to everybody for listening. And it just means the world to me that you're here on this journey with me. And of course, I'm on the journey with you too. So I hope we all can share and learn from one another. Speaking of, if you go to wisesquirrels.com/podcast, there is a button down below that you can actually leave a recording. You can actually record an audio comment or a question. And I encourage you to do that. And I'll include your voice on an upcoming episode with your question or your comment. And I'll answer your question to the best of my ability. Also, if you have questions or feedback and you don't want to record audio, you can always do that by emailing me hello@wisesquirrels, that's plural, wisesquirrels.com. I've got a great show this week. I'm featuring the executive producer of the documentary, The Disruptors. And this is Nancy Armstrong. Nancy is awesome. And her dedication and commitment to ADHD is commendable. This movie features interviews about ADHD with people who you may not know have ADHD. People like Paris Hilton or will.i.am or Scott Kelly. Terry Bradshaw, like all these people who you may not know already have ADHD. Even Howie Mandel, who, if you know Howie Mandel, it's not a complete surprise there. I love his work. Anyway, the movie is called The Disruptors. And if you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend you do. It's a great film, not just about featuring celebrities who have ADHD, but also it follows some stories about different families experiencing diagnosis of ADHD. And it really is a good educational film, but also very entertaining as well. So I highly recommend it. And so with that, I don't have too much to report on this week. Let's just get right to the interview. Again, if you have any questions, comments, reach out to me. Honestly, I would love to hear from you, and keep those reviews coming, friends. They mean the world to me. And with that, I want to say thank you again. Happy Thanksgiving to my American listeners. If you're Canadian, happy belated Thanksgiving. And if you're anyone else from anywhere, it's always a good time to give thanks and to be thankful. So be thankful. Now, I began the show by asking Nancy to introduce herself.
I'm Nancy Armstrong, and I'm the executive producer of the award-winning documentary film, The Disruptors.
Where are you from originally? Is it Wisconsin?
Illinois.
Illinois. Okay, cool.
I'm a Midwesterner.
Yes. I'm from Toronto originally. So.
Oh, okay. I left the Midwest when I was 21, I guess. Never to return.
Never to was that to follow? Because I know you did a lot of theater, acting, and that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that
Was
was
that?
there have been many careers, but the first career was as an actor. The second career was in communication. The third career was co-founding a women's leadership platform. And so this is the filmmaking is the fourth
That's amazing.
and final.
Well, it's cool too because you kind of come full circle. This is something I'm discovering myself in my own career as well. Because for me, if there's one word, it's really around communications for me. That's kind of been the thread line through my whole career. So,
yep.
Yeah. And I even dabbled with acting, and the closest I got was a extra role in the movie 54 with Mike Myers and Nev Campbell and Ryan Philippe. And it's quite wonderful. Not at all. The scene is like when Ryan Philippe first enters this, Studio 54, and he's it's a slow motion kind of track shot that kind of gradually it's all on him as he enters the dance floor, and I'm this like dancing head over his shoulder, looking like an idiot. So yeah, which isn't hard for me to do. So you started with acting, and where did you move to from Illinois to follow that pursuit?
Los Angeles.
Yeah, a logical place to be.
I was there for a while.
Yeah.
And then decided I'd rather be in the real world. So went to graduate school and moved to New York.
And is that where you joined Ogilvy? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And what were you doing? What were you doing there?
Just investor relations.
So that's cool too, because it sounds, getting into like being an executive producer. I mean, obviously it's very much a relations game and getting investment in order to help produce a film, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say all of your experiences are cumulative. So it doesn't really matter what you start out doing. You're building a skill set as you go along, and you sort of discover along the way what you love and what you're passionate about. And so it truly is the journey and not the destination. And so I try to advise my kids in the same direction, is that you'll figure out what you want to do and what you're passionate about, but you have to start somewhere and run full speed ahead to that.
Yes.
And then along that journey, you'll go, no, I want this. And then you can pivot, so I think, but yeah, everything I've been interested in has been around communication, storytelling, producing, sort of various art forms that are all kind of related. Yeah.
And, you mentioned, speaking to your kids and inspiring them about, kind of career paths and things like that. I've got my kids. My daughter will be 17 next week, and my son will be 18 in 2 weeks. So they're 11 and a half months apart.
Wow.
That is actually Irish twins,
right, exactly.
as it's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the foreshadowing there is my wife and I met in Ireland, of all places. So
wow.
that explains things.
Is she Ireland?
Not at all. No Irish roots whatsoever. No.
Oh.
Right. Yeah. No, she's
Canadian. You're Canadian.
I'm Canadian. She's not even Canadian. She's American. She's from Tennessee, which is why we live in Nashville now. So yeah, you mentioned your kids, and it was your son's diagnosis with ADHD that got you along this path. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, we sort of early on knew something was different about him. Something was up. We didn't know what it was. He was a perfect baby and, never cried and was so easy. So we thought we were just on the easy street to parenthood. And then, around the time he was 12, 13, 14 months, and particularly when he started moving around the world, we noticed that there were some differences between him and the other kids. Like he just moved faster, like he was driven by a motor and, various other things. One of them was sensory. And so by age 4, we didn't know what to do. We took him to various experts and landed on this sensory integration disorder. And we did all kinds of occupational therapy for that. And then at some point, I think he was, 8 or 9 years old, and I took him to a psychologist because things were really difficult at school and really difficult at home. And we had no idea, not one person, not one doctor, not one teacher, no one mentioned anything about ADHD. So it just never came up, which is hard to imagine now since he was a classic textbook kid with ADHD. So the psychologist recommended that we get him tested, and the diagnostician said, he has ADHD and he's in the 96th percentile for hyperactivity. And my husband was in the room while the diagnostician is telling us this and going down the list of symptoms. And my husband says, I have all those symptoms. And he said, well, yes, it's hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
So there we were in the room. It was a very big day with a lot of revelatory discoveries. And so that was, at least we knew what it was at that point. I think we were happy to know there was a reason for all of these things. And the diagnostician said there's no such thing as sensory integration disorder, that there are sensory symptoms associated with ADHD. That's just part of the diagnosis.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of, like, for example, I was suffering from like mild depression, more anxiety, back in 2020, go figure. Most people were. But it wasn't until this year that I was diagnosed with ADHD at 50. So
really?
Yeah. And that was really the impetus of why Squirrels, being the person that I am right away. I was like, well, I wrote a book called New Business Networking a number of years ago. And in the book, I referenced Doug the dog from Up, Squirrel, and have referenced that meme so many times through, my life. And I do a lot of keynote presentations and workshops around communication skills. And Squirrel is a gag, a joke, a meme that I reference all the time. And it wasn't until this year when I was like, oh, but I'm older and wiser. So
it's a meme for ADHD. You know that, right?
Oh, no, 100%.
Yeah. But so you have a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old, and assuming one of them or both are diagnosed, the number of people in the country right now, we think it's like nearly 10% in terms of people getting diagnosed, or I guess it's children being diagnosed is at around 10%. But what Ned just said in this interview we did recently was that doesn't count the people who have ADHD but don't have serious impairment. Those people don't get tested because they're not seriously impaired. They do feel like they have to work twice as hard, as kids. They have to work twice as hard in school, but they just do it. They work twice as hard. So they are, in a way, and I don't know if this is true with your kids, underachieving, but they're doing fine. They're not falling out the bottom like my son was. Like there was no way of continuing to function normally because we were not functioning.
I was going to reference the statistic in the Disruptors, which I actually took a screenshot of the image in the film of the baby boy and the baby girl, but it was that ADHD in boys is linked to genetics 65% of the times, and girls it's close to 90% of the time. And when I've mentioned that to people, even ADHD coaches and others who I've spoken to on this podcast, they're often shocked to hear that number, just because it's I think it's even higher in boys. I think the numbers are probably more similar than that. Those are the official numbers that we were able to derive for the film. Tell me a little bit about the backstory there of how this movie came to be. And by the way, I haven't even said it yet. Awesome movie.
Oh, thank you.
Great job. Yeah. No, it's excellent. With
Atlas Films, and they are abnormally brilliant documentarians, and I knew that they were the perfect filmmakers to partner with, and they did a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy with the film and proud of the work that we did on it. So, but anyway, so the backstory is, well, I also have two daughters who are both diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
But I really that number one, a couple of things. There's a tremendous amount of confusion around ADHD still.
Yes.
And certainly that was the case when I was making the decision to quit my job and make the film. And I'm not sure why this issue is so controversial. And maybe it's because it's directed toward children primarily. Like we're now talking more about adult ADHD, but the children, that's where the real obvious struggle is. And it's kids and parents that are in this struggle to get through K through 12 education with their ADHD children. Yeah. So there's tremendous, there is deeply misunderstood. There's so much misinformation. There's all these pervasive myths that I experienced as a parent with children with ADHD, and the stigma. Everyone hides in the shadows. Oh, no, nothing to see here. My kids are perfect. No one talks about it as if it's something to be ashamed of. And I never thought it was something to be ashamed of because my husband has it and he's been incredibly successful. There was this huge stigma around ADHD and people were hiding in the shadows and ashamed of it. And I never thought it was something to be ashamed of because my husband, was diagnosed with ADHD at the same time my son was, and he's brilliantly successful. And yeah, did he have his struggles growing up? Yes, he had some struggles growing up, but he found what he was passionate about. And it's the different way that his brain works that has made him so successful.
Yeah.
In his career path.
What's his career, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
So he was one of the early people at Google. And then at the height of Google's popularity in around 2009, he left Google at the height of his career to go run AOL, which was a sinking ship. That's something only someone with ADHD would do.
Yeah.
And it was really hard, really, really hard. And he took a lot of flack for it. People just didn't like that he was trying to turn AOL around. And of course, he was successful doing that. And the first CEO they had 5 CEOs in 10 years. And it was Tim who was able to turn that ship around and bring the company back to profitability. And then they sold it to Verizon.
Yeah, people are shocked how much AOL still earns. Like a lot of people still use AOL, and people are often. Yeah, I mean, I was actually a speaker for Google for 5 years, so I have a background and have done work in the tech space quite a lot. So but I didn't know that was your husband. That's cool. That's interesting.
Yeah. Tim Armstrong.
Yeah.
And then he founded a company called Flowcode. So that's been since I guess 2019. So
it's pretty fascinating, the correlation between entrepreneurship and ADHD and the creativity aspect of it. Certainly in the tech space, there's so many neurodiverse developers, UI designers, UX, like all that space, and just developers in general. So it's pretty fascinating. I have a keynote presentation I do now called The Root Down, and it actually goes into some of the. It's about my ADHD diagnosis, but also about removing stigmas and supporting people. And a big part of it is talking about different entrepreneurs who have ADHD, and yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Well, and there's research to back it up. There's research on the strengths of ADHD, some of which are creative cognition, conceptual expansion, innovative thinking. Those are all 100% necessary if you want to be an entrepreneur. And there was also a study done at Syracuse University on the relationship between the ADHD brain and entrepreneurs. And they found that if you are someone with ADHD and you have a couple of things, one of two things, you are more likely to be successful than a neurotypical person. And the two things are either you have the requisite education for that to build the business, and or you have a very stable partner in life. Without those two things, ADHD people did not do better than neurotypical people in entrepreneurship. But with one of those two things, they did better. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. And people with ADHD, it makes sense, need support. They need, particularly growing up, they need parents who are behind them. They need to get through school, and they need support in those early years to kind of make it through to adulthood intact. And if they do, they are often the ones who become our innovators, entrepreneurs, business leaders, award-winning artists and athletes, because they then can launch into their life. And if they can find what they love and accelerate the super skills of ADHD, they don't just fly, they soar.
Yeah. And I'm working on the soaring part. And I'm so thankful that I married my best friend, and we've been together for 25 years. I wrote an 80,000 word book about networking, and it's something near and dear to my heart, networking the good way on social media and blah, blah, blah. But I mentioned that because I had like a contract. I had a legal obligation. I had an advance and had dates. I had to deliver chapters to my publisher. And I almost quit like 20 times during the process. And it wasn't for my wife, who was like, no, you can do it, like, or you have to do it. So let's just, you got to get it done kind of thing. And yeah, I wouldn't have been able to pull it off without her support. So yeah. Very, very helpful. She's also a school teacher, and she's been telling me for years that I have ADHD. So there is a lesson here.
That's so
Listen
fun.
to your spouse.
Yeah.
But some of the celebrities that you lined up for the Disruptors, some would be big surprises to people who didn't know that they had ADHD. People like Tom Scott or Paris Hilton or Will.i.am. And then, as a comedy fan, Howie Mandel totally makes sense.
Yeah.
That he does. Very talented.
More so overtly creative people are less of a surprise, because there is becoming a more normalized association between creativity and ADHD. But what people are surprised by are, Scott Kelly, NASA astronaut, Hall of Fame astronaut. He had a hard time getting through high school, and the dad wasn't going to send them to college. He and his twin, Mark, and but then it was that threat of not going to college that caused them to do a little better in high school. It was almost like when kids with ADHD have their back to the wall, the dopamine starts flying at an accelerated rate, and they can do the thing they need to get done. If there's no urgency to something, it just is procrastination, or, they don't care. And we had a similar experience with my son. He wasn't doing great freshman year in high school. And, we all got hauled into the office, and the head of the upper school said, "We're going to hold your contract because this might not be the right school for you." And my son was horrified by that. And the grades just went up.
That's great. I was not so lucky. I was kicked out of 5 high schools.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So not as
Well, what did you do?
Luckily, I wasn't bad in the sense, like I wasn't violent, or it wasn't, I was a class clown from the very beginning. And actually, the route down this presentation actually tells that whole story. The beginning of that presentation is a story about Little Red Riding Hood in grade 1, in my first grade. And I was supposed to be the lumberjack rescuing Little Red Riding Hood when he heard her cries, and I would be cutting a tree. What happened was I was just such a class clown that my teacher demoted me to the tree. And so I had to be a tree and just stand there wearing like brown pants and a green, sweater. And then the new lumberjack would cut me, and I was instructed to just tilt. And that was my staging. That was my stage direction. And in the moment of that happening, I was like, no. And instead of tilting my body, my arms, I fell flat on my face. Boom, on the stage. Everybody started laughing. And I think that was my first taste for me as a speaker. I do so much stage work, obviously, and in front of audiences. That was my first dopamine hit in front of an audience. And I'm like, hello, wait a second. And I was kicked out in grade 1. I had to go to a different school after that.
Well, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Think about that. How ridiculous that is. That you would
It's
get
crazy.
For mishap in the school play.
Yeah.
Really. It's shameful.
It
really
is. I'm thankful that my mom actually kept all of my old report cards, and I had them in a box in a closet. And after getting diagnosed this year with ADHD, my wife and I found that box and we started reading all the teachers' comments over the years. And like, if you saw them, it would be like, yeah, hands down, case study on ADHD, positive ADHD for sure. But yeah, it only took me 50 years to find it.
Wow.
What are some things that you've learned about ADHD since the movie came out? And I know you mentioned Dr. Ned Hallowell earlier, and I believe the story, my understanding is it was a dinner party that you met him and just started chatting. Is that right? Is that the story?
I was at a dinner party and someone very well known also had a child with ADHD, and we started sharing stories about our children. And he said, "Have you met Ned?" And I said, "No. Who's Ned?" And he said, "Oh my gosh, you have to meet Ned Hallowell." Mm-hmm. So I started researching Ned and I read his book, and it was really kind of, it was revelatory, because not only did I find my son in that book, but of course it was an exact description of my husband. So it was just good for me to sort of get that sort of understanding. And I think what I learn as we go is that the stories of everyone who's grown up with ADHD or that has ADHD are also similar. All the people in the film, the well-known public figures, they have the same story to tell from their childhoods as all the kids in the film.
Yeah.
And the reason to put them in was also, we can talk about the fact that there's a strengths-based approach, and this person has ADHD, and you can name all the well-known people, but it's another to hear them speak about it to camera. It's undeniable.
Yeah.
We've all, if you're a parent of children with ADHD, you've had those conversations with teachers where they roll their eyes at you, and, their perception is probably that these are just bad kids with bad parents, or, parents who aren't disciplining them enough. There's this profound misperception that persists that this is willful, behavioral, that, kids are doing this intentionally. And that's because the outward presentation of ADHD is behavioral. So that's what leads to all the questioning. Is this real, or is this willfulness? And so that's something I really wanted to get at the film. And, Ned's been at this strengths-based approach for decades, but there's something about a 90-minute film that can sort of, curate all of the best information from the top experts and get a message across that I think can resonate with a wider audience. And I think that was sort of the mission of the film, is like, let's sort of reframe ADHD once and for all as a brain type or a trait that comes with some challenges that need to be managed, but that also comes with some very significant and impressive strengths. And we should look at both sides of that. Too often we myopically look at the negatives of ADHD. Oh, that kid has ADHD. Oh, what a shame. Not really. That kid's going to struggle now, but one day he's going to be signing your paychecks.
Yeah.
And that's the switch that needs to happen on a societal level about kids with ADHD. It's the first sort of recognition from the outside world should be, oh, you have ADHD. Oh, that means you're very creative. You have the ability to hyper focus. You're very curious. You've got lots of ideas. We'll just help you with organization and, put you in the front of the class so that you don't get distracted. And we'll do things to help you. Mm-hmm. And you'll have hopefully a treatment plan with your doctor, and you'll figure out a way to manage while your brain is developing. I think that's sort of the difficult thing, is having an undeveloped brain that has ADHD. It's just very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking to Tamara, who wrote Your Brain's Not Broken, and she's fantastic. She was talking about, it's basically a 3-year, give or take, but about a 3-year delay in development of the prefrontal cortex. Yeah, it's you're kind of 3 years behind in that department, but at the same time, to your point, I mean, yeah, there are so many strengths here that need to be acknowledged, and also, I mean, challenges. Certainly, something we've talked about on the podcast here is about, where when you don't treat ADHD, that can lead to very bad places. But I raise that because it is so important to be treated, because, yeah, I mean, it can lead to there's addictive personality or addictive tendencies for
much more common.
ADHDers.
Yep, much more common with people who have ADHD, to be sure.
Yeah. But the positive is that it also makes you really addicted, air quotes, into whatever you're working on that's getting you excited. And that's when a magic happens.
It is. I mean, when we were making the film, my son was still in high school, and I thought, I really, we were sweating it out there in high school.
Yeah.
Just wanted him to get through, graduate, and, figure out a college that he wanted to attend. And then he started working with my husband at Flow Code, and he found, as Ned says, the lock that his key goes into. That's the thing. You have to find the lock that your key goes into. And he found it there, and he's super talented.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that shows up in a high school setting necessarily. So if they're musically talented, or like my daughters are both singers and stage performers. So
yeah,
even though they might struggle with standardized testing, man, they can hit the mark on the stage and belt out a solo free of inhibition, which is amazing to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So, they're super, super creative. And with Jack, it was the work environment, the creativity of a work environment where he's building products and things like that just turned him on. And he spends, he can spend inordinate amount of time drilling down on something he's trying to figure out, where I think, we would all love to be able to focus that way. So his gifts have shown up. Which is great.
Any tips for?
He'll always have the other. He'll always, have the other things that he has to manage.
Yeah. Any tips for people to help them find the lock?
I mean, you have to go out in the world. You can't. It's not going to happen sitting at home. So you have to kind of go out in the world and have experiences and do internships and get jobs. And you have to be people with ADHD have excessive energy, and they need to be busy. So they sort of need to have a lot of things in their lives, and it's really good for them to get, adequate exercise and sleep and nutrition, just like everyone else. But I think even more so, my husband wakes up at 5 a.m., exercises, meditates, eats right. I mean, he does a whole bunch of rituals that help him, sort of amplify his super skills. But all of those things turn his brain on and keep him running effectively.
And caffeine, probably.
It's probably
for me. That's me anyway. Because I do. Yeah, it's interesting because you're hitting on a lot of things, and I'm glad to hear it, because in this presentation that I've created, you're hitting on a lot of things that I talk about in there, because mindfulness and meditation, like that's a huge one, and something that I'm very, very, I have a daily practice that I do, and I find it incredibly rewarding. And the thing is, I started that I made a lot of changes to my life in 2020 when the world was imploding. And in addition to the obvious parts of the world imploding that affected everybody or many people, we had a tornado in Nashville that destroyed my kid's school.
Oh my God.
Fast forward 3 months later, we had another storm that put 10 holes in our roof, and we were out of our house for 3 months. So at the time I was, having a few too many beers, and I'm like, I need to we weren't even staying at home. We had to live somewhere else for 3 months while I dealt with insurance and during a pandemic, and contractors and all the things. And so it was during then I was like, no, it's time to take meditation more seriously. It's time to start taking fitness and mental health more seriously. It's time to quit drinking once and for all, which I did. It was, all these things helped me prepare for this year when the big ADHD letters appeared, and that diagnosis appeared. So I'm thankful that I made those changes to my life ahead of the diagnosis. But certainly I now know how I was using certain things to kind of curb the symptoms that I was feeling from. Yeah. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. So, yeah. Do you have any updates on the kids in the film? You have such a great group of diverse people in the movie, and some wonderful stories. Have you been able to keep up with them at all, or?
I need to do that. I get that. It's funny. I get that request all the time. And I think it's a testament to the fact that we were just so lucky to get great kids and great families to do the film.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've gotten an update on Zara, and she's a brilliant girl, and I think she's doing great. And I've gotten a few updates. Everyone's doing really well.
That's
no
awesome.
surprise. Like they're outstanding kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But they've definitely had, their struggles. But
absolutely.
the parent, they've got great parents, so I'm not worried about any of them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. What about like for projects? I'm almost selfishly asking for myself here with Why Squirrels, but with projects where, folks with ADHD want to express, maybe they're a singer or an actor, or a writer, somebody creating content that is around and about ADHD, but any tips to help them get it out there, get it out in the world? It sounds like you've been, obviously with the Disruptors, you've done a great job with that. But from other things, any tips on getting the word out and getting help to, building communities, getting investors, all those things to help build something?
Well, for us, I think the film came out in 2022. So I've been talking that we've been doing screenings all over the country, and there's screenings happening all over the world. I think the film has been a great catalyst for conversation. It's sort of curated the conversation down to here's what it is, and let's talk about it. So, I go to quite a few screenings. I have several this month for ADHD Awareness Month.
Yeah.
They're happening in New Zealand, in Australia, in Ireland. All the time I get Google alerts for community screenings and school screenings. And we just did a campaign this month for ADHD Awareness Month called Upside of ADHD. So we have a site, upsideofadhd.org. And we actually offered the film complimentary access to the film until tomorrow, October 6th. So I don't know if anyone will hear that because it's probably going to air. But anyway, the film is at disruptorsfilm.com, and along with many other resources. And I think what I realized making the film is this is a community, and there's a shorthand within the community. And so every time I go and do Q&As with parents, people are dying to talk about this, to ask questions, to have the community, parents just as even more so than kids, because the parents are the ones that are in the trenches trying to figure this out. And it's so hard, on a number of levels, whether it's academically or socially or in sports or in, outside activities. It's really tough for parents to navigate that as well as kids. So it's nice for parents to have a community. And there's, there's many podcasts, and there's like 200 Facebook groups for ADHD. I was amazed at the communities on Facebook. There's really pretty active communities.
What are some of the misconceptions that you've come across, both, in your own research and development of the film, and even since the film?
One, that it doesn't exist at all, that that it's not a real thing, that these are just bad kids with bad parents, which is obviously not true. The other is that it only affects boys. Girls are affected equally by ADHD. They just sometimes present slightly differently. They don't have the same, perhaps, level of hyperactivity. They don't have the same sort of outward aggression that boys do because they don't have testosterone. And they can sometimes go unnoticed and undiagnosed. So they're in the back of the classroom, looking out the window, twirling their hair. They have more emotional impulsivity. They are a little more tearful than boys, and they're exquisitely sensitive to rejection. I think that's probably true of both boys and girls. But girls are able to kind of white knuckle it longer than boys. So they tend to get diagnosed in middle school when the demands change. There's 6 classes as opposed to 1. The expectations for achievement go up, and then the hormones kick in. And that tends to exacerbate ADHD in puberty for girls, but also in menopause for women. So, but all of those I think we debunk all of those in the film.
Yeah.
And I think, the other issue is that there is a real shortage of ADHD experts and clinicians. So, if you happen to live somewhere and there isn't a diagnostician or an experienced clinician that can help you figure out whether you have it, I think it's really terrible. I think I saw something in Australia where it's an 8-month wait to get an appointment with a clinician to see if you have it, if you feel that you do have it, you're struggling, you're exhibiting impairment across a number of settings, and you think it's ADHD. It takes 8 months to get an appointment with the doctor. So then I saw an article in Australia that said, it's better if you do better with your ADHD if you don't get it diagnosed.
Ooh.
Which seemed very convenient.
Yeah.
Given the fact that you couldn't get it diagnosed because there were no doctors to diagnose it. So they just came right out and said, it's better if you don't.
Wow.
Which is just silly. If you have it, and I know a lot of parents actually, I've met many parents who were like, well, we know she has ADHD, but we're not getting her diagnosed. I don't really understand that, because I think if your brain is wired differently, you want to know that, and you want to be able to figure out where you need to compensate, and not also feel that, a lot of times kids with ADHD feel they're not smart when they're super smart. They just have trouble organizing and being on time and, getting their homework in, because they left it at home. The disorganization really wreaks havoc on, them being able to be successful in school.
Yeah, you're really not setting them up for success by not at least having them diagnosed.
But it's also that there's some sort of shame in the diagnosis. That's the thing that I think is bad. That's the thing we want to change, is that this is not a shameful diagnosis. This is just a brain type.
Yeah.
And you have it or you don't. And if you do have it, you'll have some challenges that you'll need to manage, but it also will come with some strengths that are great. Yeah. And that's the way we should really look at it. And we're not there yet.
I was asked about metaphors, metaphors for having ADHD. And for me, it's an operating system that's just being run in the wrong device pre-treatment, right? So it's like running, Apple OS in like a Samsung or like a Google device or something, right? Like it's some software will still run, some might be a little sluggish, it might crash a lot, you might get a bug here and there, but chances are it's not going to be quite right. And if you want it to run smoothly, fix it.
Yeah, might need some extra things to go along with it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Australia. I have come across some interesting stories about, like, for example, in Japan, where meds are banned. You cannot get meds. In fact, you can't bring meds. So if you're traveling with ADHD to Japan, you've got to check your meds at the door, because you're not even allowed to bring them in. At least last I heard, as far as stimulants go, which obviously is a big problem as well. So, Yeah, there's so much, as you know, misinformation, but also just ignorance around treatment and meds. But then the other side of it too, and a big challenge I'm thinking a lot about. There's a shortage of meds right now, and also a shortage, as you said, in Australia, and I expect it's probably the same in Canada right now too, where there's a lack of doctors, and you need, at least in the US, you need a psychologist or a psychiatrist to diagnose you for treatment.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of issues right now. There's a dearth of specialists. There's the shortage of some of the stimulant medication that people use. And yeah, it's really, if you are someone for whom stimulant medication works, it's great. It doesn't work for everyone. It's a frustrating trial and error process to find the right stimulant. But if you can find the right stimulant and it works with you, target symptom relief with no side effects, it's great.
Yeah.
And if it helps you, it's a little bit like putting glasses on, versus squinting all day. Right. It's not great. Typically, kids with ADHD don't love taking the ADHD medicine. They only take it because they want to be able to focus and learn, and they don't want to miss anything in school. They don't want to fall behind. They don't want to do poorly. They don't take it because it's a feel good. So the only people abusing ADHD medications are people without ADHD.
That's true.
The other thing is there are studies that show that people who use, over time, people who use stimulant medication are less likely to abuse other drugs because they've been diagnosed. They don't need to shut their brain off with alcohol or drugs because they have a way to manage their brain, when they need to do it. And it's not that people don't necessarily always take it every day. They take it situationally, or if they're in school, and if they're at home, not in school, maybe they won't take it. Those are all very personal preferences. But yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of hurdles to overcome, and the lack of doctors and the shortage of medication are just.
I want to be mindful of your time here, and I know we're running out of time. So, Nancy, any topics, anything that I missed asking you about that you'd like to share?
I mean, I'd say, I would urge people to go see the film. I'm amazed at the impact it's having. I mean, I knew it would have an impact, and I wanted it to have an impact. I've been blown away at the impact it's had on families and kids and parents. I get letters from parents all over the world. And the point of the film is not only to educate parents and children, but also teachers. We need to get the film into schools because that's where kids spend the majority of their time. And it's, a teacher can have an incredibly positive impact on a child's life. But if they don't understand their kids with ADHD, they're powerless to help them. So this is something that parents are going to need to advocate for, to have the film shown, at their school. And we have a company, Rocco Films, that will offer the film free to schools who are unable to, pay for the film. The point for us was to get the film out there.
Yeah.
And for it to help people, for it to help educators, to help parents, to help children, to help people in the workforce understand their own employees better. Why is this person great in a brainstorm, but a little disorganized over here? Or, you sort of have to, as a business manager, understand the skill set of people with ADHD and maximize it. Make sure they're doing something that maximize, because they will be better at that than anyone else on your team. And so it's like opening people's eyes to the fact that these are highly creative, highly curious people who are also have no risk aversion, all these things. Like it's a very specific skill set. That's why, but interestingly, we see them in every industry at the top of their field. I mean, I think that's what we were able to show in the film. In emergency rooms. Why? Because they need that stimulation. Sitting in a cubicle in a quiet room all day might sound good to someone who's neurotypical, but to someone with ADHD, it's like a death sentence. So an emergency room where there's, people running back and forth, where there's emergencies, their dopamine is flying on a natural high the entire time. Yeah. And they are not unnerved by that. Their brains turn on. So firefighting, Surgeons, most people don't want to cut open a body and transplant a liver. For someone who is a surgeon with ADHD, that's where they're in the zone. That's their feel good place, is doing that work. High intensity, high stimulation, high stress work. That's where they thrive. Astronaut, we had Scott Kelly, like, who wants to careen through space? Only someone with ADHD, I would think.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I think we need to open our eyes to the fact that we have this trait has been around for 500 years. It's not going anywhere. We're not curing it, and we don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
This is really, in a way, how we've moved society forward. And we point this out in the film, and all the people famously through history who have had ADHD and have changed the course of history, from Einstein to Edison to Walt Disney, and the list goes on. All of these people exhibited many of the signs of ADHD growing up, and struggled growing up, and did amazing things.
What's the biggest struggle in getting the word out about the film now, as far as like getting more people, more places screening it, things like that? I ask partly because you've got my wheels turning, thinking about places that I could do that.
We've done several media campaigns. We're all over Facebook. So we've done social media. We have social media going constantly, Instagram, Facebook. We've done major television media. There've been, so we've sort of run the gamut of getting it out there. And then I think there's just a period of time that it takes for it to kind of, we had, for a long time, we had 1,000 followers on Facebook, 1,100. It just went up. And then it was going up 1,000 a day. All of a sudden, something happened where the wheel starts to turn faster. And now there's 50,000 plus. So I think it just takes time. So we're continuing to work at it. And I think there's enough people out there that know about the film that are recommending the film. And so it's like, it sort of exponentially gets out there eventually.
Yeah, we gotta wake up Netflix to get them to get
Netflix
it there.
Rejected the film, so
they did. On what grounds? Why were they rejected? It's such a great film.
Not really our thing. They probably have some content person who doesn't have ADHD and doesn't have children. They said we don't do. Anyway, they didn't pick up the film. People were really upset about it, and I said I'm happy to put it on Netflix free of charge.
Yeah.
But it's not on Netflix. So
I'm surprised by that, because they do like physical. Like Blue Zones right now, which is a great series about longevity, healthy longevity, Dan Buettner's documentary, and great book also. But, and that's partly about mental health, but it's more about physical, and diet and things. But I'm surprised they, someone's going to see it and be like, you know what?
Well, it's all over the internet. It's on Apple TV, iTunes, Amazon Prime, YouTube, Vudu, Google Play, locals.com. So it's everywhere. It's widely available. Yeah. But I think, people were hoping it would be somewhere that they have a streaming subscription. And again, I would put it on Netflix in a heartbeat, but
they'll wake up to it.
I think they will eventually. Right now there's only one film like this. There are a lot of films that touch on ADHD from the perspective of one person, and they might have, an expert here and there, but we got the top people, Ned Hallowell, Russell Barkley, all of these people who are kind of the godfathers of, and understand this the best we have in the film.
Did you see the short film by Samantha Lebrecht, who I met recently? She's got a short film on YouTube called Trying. If you look up like Trying ADHD, I don't know. Have you seen that?
No.
It's great. It's great. And I think she's trying to develop it into a streaming series, like a TV series or something.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's really great. I should connect you, because it's
the more the
great. Yeah. And she's also, an actor, singer, but she also had an all women cast or all women crew. on the film, and she's a singer and stuff too. So it's yeah, you guys are kindred spirits for sure. All right. Well, Nancy, to be respectful of your time, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Dave. My pleasure.
Yeah, this has been awesome. I'm excited to share it with all the wise squirrels out there. So thanks again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to Wise Squirrels. It has been amazing to share this with you. Best way to show your support for the show, leave us a review, follow the show, and share it with the people in your life. We drop new episodes every 2 weeks, so stay tuned for that. Plus, drop by wisesquirrels.com or click the link in the podcast description, and you'll find a lot of different resources like articles, an assessment, a newsletter, lots of good stuff over at wisesquirrels.com. So drop by, let me know what you think, and we'll see you next time. Take care.